Bum, bum. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Designer's Den. Very excited today to have my friend Brenden Lewis on, who I actually know from some of the conventions I've done, and Brendan has DM'd for me as a volunteer. Brendan
Yep.
has not DM'd a table that I've sat at, and we will correct that one day.
I would love that. We should
Yes.
do that.
Um, yeah. And we'll have opportunities too because you're doing your stuff virtually now, just like everyone else in the world. But, anyways, Brendan, thank you so much for being on the show today. Do you want to give a little introduction, a little bit about yourself and how you kind of fit into the world of tabletop RPGs?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey, I'm Brendan, and I have been playing D&D, DMing for years, ever since I was in college, basically. And so I've done it a lot for my friends. A number of years ago, I got into the convention scene, so I've been doing a lot of that, and eventually sort of took the plunge and decided that I wanted to publish and get into that realm of things. And now, professional DMing with Start Playing and the Baldwin conventions and whatnot. So just like head first, here we go. So that's me.
And that's I keep saying this over and over again on the show, but that's really a common theme. Like you kind of end up doing these things almost accidentally. You're like, I kind of like this game. And next thing you know, you're like, I don't really know what happened, but I'm a published author and people paid money for it. So,
Yeah, the
uh,
the imposter syndrome is real.
yeah. But somebody has bought your stuff, so that does therefore make you a professional paid author. So, congratulations on your achievements.
Thank you.
um, but yeah, so we're actually going to talk a little bit about your first published adventure today because as with any author, DM, D&D, or whatever, you have plenty of adventures before this one. They've just not made it out and properly formatted art layout, giving it to the public to give you money. But pretty excited. This particular adventure kind of ties into the current D&D hardcover book that is Icewind Dale: Rime of the Frost Maiden. So, um, well, you know, um, rather than me talking all about it, why don't you actually tell people a little bit about your adventure, Icewind Curses Hunger? And I'm going to drop a link to it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, it is a fun little divergence into really embracing those horror themes that Icewind Dale sort of promised us, Rime of the Frost Maiden, being that sort of creepy vibe, and really centers on the scarcities that come with what's going on in Icewind Dale in the time of Rime of the Frost Maiden. The fact that food is short, tempers are short, people are stressed. So it actually kind of started a very long time ago when I was running Storm King's Thunder. And I, for my table there, interjected these hags that popped up periodically throughout the course of their adventures. So then when Rime of the Frost Maiden was announced, I kind of got this thinking of like, okay, we got this horror vibe. This is what hags love. What can they sort of capitalize in these places?
Mm-hmm.
So this first module, sort of in what will be a trilogy, focuses on the desperation of hunger, the shortage of food, and the party being lost in a storm, or various other hooks that might bring them to this location. And they find what seems like an abandoned homestead of some sort. That's their desperate plea for survival. And then they quickly find that things are not as they expect as they try to weather the night, and they are drawn into the dangers of this place.
All right, and I've got the cover up right in front of my face right now. Um, and one thing that the first time you showed this to me, well, maybe the second time. I think the first time it wasn't in pretty, but you showed me this artwork, and that's one thing that really kind of stood out to me is when I look at this cover, like as a if I think of it in the terms of one of my characters, my little gnomes are terrified I don't know what this is. I don't know who it is. I don't know if it's magical. I don't know, but I can see into its chest cavity, and it is going to destroy everything that I love and hold dear. So I'm
Yeah.
already terrified.
Yeah, that was a good friend of mine. Nicole Putong is an amazing
Mhm.
artist. So she did the art cover there for me. She's got other art as we go through the series. She drew the hags for me as well, and I just chef's kiss. She captured exactly what I was going
Yeah.
for. Love it.
And the other thing, yet to note from the cover, is that it does say part one of the Hags of Horrorfrost anthology. So, you've already got that from the beginning. That this is setting up for something even more. Like, if this is the beginning, it's like, where do we go from here?
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
so, other than the obvious, like, tie-in to the current storyline, what really kind of inspired you to just kind of make that move and be like, you know what? I'm gonna do this particular adventure series, and this is gonna be the thing that I publish finally.
hmm Well, the current storyline was definitely the biggest part of the impetus. Like I said, I first invented these hags and a semblance of these adventures, at least this first one, when I ran Storm King's Thunder.
Mhm.
And so it had been kicking around in the back of my mind since all the way back then of like, I want to publish these gals someday and make this official and whatnot. So then the fact that, we've had COVID quarantine, people have some spare time on their hands, myself heavily included. And the fact that we saw Rime of the Frost Maiden being announced, as soon as the announcement came, I was like, now is my time. I've been putting it off and giving myself excuses. Here's the storyline where people might be looking for this kind of thing, and I'm ready to share it.
It was the proverbial sign then.
Exactly, exactly. So yeah, I rushed to do that. My biggest panic, of course, was I'm writing this before Rime of the Frost Maiden comes out, and I don't know what they're going to include. Like, are they going to have a coven of hags, or so it's like I'm kind of writing this in the dark. And as soon as it came out, I wanted to like release the next day, so I'm frantically like flipping through it, like, okay, what's going on? What's going on? Tweak, 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 and then push it out, and we'll circle back to it.
uh, I, you know, I, I, I wish that I could say that I completely understood that feeling. But unfortunately, I did have early access to the Rime and the Frost Maiden book. So I also released a product on launch day, but I didn't quite have that same sense of urgency to me. And as mine was part of the Guild Adepts program, we also were like not as worried about overlap. We knew where the overlap was, but we kind of went
Right.
that opposite direction of um, some more lighthearted stuff because we really, um, well, some of us had worked on the book, but outside of that, like we really thought, it's kind of time to give that, all of these people who've been out there in the wings and they're going to bring us that horror. Um, we'll let them do that, you know? And so, I, um, well, I'm not a huge fan of horror personally, but, but nonetheless, I have been excited to see all of these things because it gives you, a lot of idea and a lot of fodder for like how to really take this setting and one, make it terrifying and make it feel real and visceral, but also how to deal with themes like this in a very sensitive way. And you've actually got a whole little section in yours, sensitivity note and content warning, because you kind of, had the same thought. Like, horror material does tend to toe that line, right?
Mhm.
Of where people have, um, aversions to it, or where some things that are used as a plot point are really real.
Yeah.
Um, and so, you know, some of the things you addressed in here um, are, yeah, like you said, gruesome. So, what was your kind of your thought behind that, and when you were putting together this whole warning, were you concerned that it was too much, or were you more like, want to make it but also want to be, I don't know,
Yeah,
the word
respect.
the word escapes me.
Yeah, cautious, respectful. Yeah, absolutely. More so on the latter. I have a funny relationship with horror. I love it when I am the one who's doing it. When I am the dungeon master, I can say horrific things, describe gruesome scenes, and it doesn't faze me. But the second you put me in front of a horror movie, I freak out and cannot handle it. So there's some cognitive wire there that it's just different things for me, I guess. So I was very cautious of not only the horror vibes and the elements that might be disturbing to people and giving that proper warning in advance so everyone can have a safe gaming experience. But also because of another theme that I came around to in the course of writing it, you know the theme here is hunger, and so the idea is that there is this creature depicted on the cover that the locals call the Geargeist, that is this has a strong resemblance to what we in pop culture would recognize as the myth of the Wendigo from Native American culture. And so as I was kind of coming to that realization of like, this is a very strong allegory and whatnot, it was really important to me to touch on some of those indigenous themes, not being an indigenous person, to sort of reflect on my own upbringing, um, and the education that I had got that was very very whitewashed, and it was sugar coated and whatnot. That I was born and raised in Vermont, and it's very much like, oh yeah, Native Americans used to live here and now they just don't. um,
Oh,
when that's not accurate,
I
that's not a
mean,
fair way of putting our history.
they don't. But there's like there is a whole series of encyclopedias that got left out in there.
Exactly. Exactly. So because of, I had that sort of upbringing, I really wanted to confront that in this module and say, that sort of sugarcoating is not fair, it's not correct, and those issues sort of need to be faced. So there is an element of that in the module where there is sort of this attempt to sugarcoat it, and you are then just slammed in your face of, no, this was an awful genocide sort of thing. So I wanted to make sure that that was called out in my content warning as well, both for people who might be triggered by that sort of content and upset by it, and also for people like me who don't come from that background to be mindful of this sort of stuff. We come from a place of privilege, and playing through this module hopefully opens your eyes to those sort of issues.
So you can't just simply, um, well, I mean, I grew up in the South where, if, as many people down there have a bit of Native American heritage and can tell you that it was not our land to begin with.
Yeah,
um, we colonized it. We forced them out, but that's not really something that's necessarily taught. It's very much a colonization type historical perspective, where it's all about what did the settlers do,
right.
whether they be, French, English, Spanish, whatever their ethnicity was, or even, the slaves. None of the history really touches on that. So I think it is important to, like, even in your fictional realm, to just point to the history of that realm itself and be like, bad things happen in this world too. And Icewind Dale is kind of an allegory to, um, well, the far north of North America.
Yeah.
So where we have the First Nations and everything, and Icewind Dale, as most people know, has a lot of people living there that aren't from
Yeah.
Icewind Dale, and they don't know the history of the native tribes, the nomads, the ragged nomads, or the other barbarian tribes, the Uthgardt. And
Hmm.
so, yeah. um, it's very easy to make sure that you confront that head on and be like, no, they've got, history. Like, I know you think this is a myth because it sounds fantastical, but it's actually just their life.
Yeah, they're right over there. Yeah. You're on their land right now. You know what you did.
Yeah. Okay. Well, not to get into too many spoilers on this. You said you didn't want to, so I don't want to go too much more into the details of the story, other than to say, if you have a desire to go a little bit more into some of the, um, I guess the word I keep going back to is like mythological type tie-ins to that area and how um things can get unexpectedly bad in some people's eyes, but yet other people in the area are like, no, this is just as bad as we actually expected. Then you probably want to, check this out, maybe make it a basis for something that grow on. Um, and so, speaking of growing on, you do have plans for more in this series. Do you want to give us like a little sneak preview of what we can expect from the rest of them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, the each of the episodes kind of has a dual purpose of there is an immediate problem in front of you, in this case it be hunger and the Geargeist creature that is here as a threat. The party encounters it their first night there. And it is outside. They can't get a clear, it's your classic horror movie. They know something's outside. They see like an antler or a claw, but they can't get the clear look at it just yet. So that's the immediate pressing problem. But when they resolve the pressing problem, they find out that there's a deeper layer, that there is
Mm-hmm.
some sort of other creature, some sort of other entity that spurned this event, that got this started. And those, of course, are each of the three hags. So the rest of the series will touch on each one of the hags. They have their own preferred brand of horror, the curses and the things that they like to inflict on people. So the next one that I'm actually already working on should be coming out. I don't have a specific timeline, but I'm shooting for maybe in March. Is a hope.
Okay. So
Will be ice.
around
Yeah,
the end of the quarter, you could be
yeah,
we,
yeah, somewhere in there. Um, so the next one will be Icewind Curses Hate, and that will delve into
ooh.
some of the themes of sort of infighting and people's prejudice, jumping to conclusions and divisions between people. I am one of its. I try to keep the modules open ended. Even in this one, I say, well, this could be in Icewind Dale. It could be in your own tundra setting. And if you go Icewind Dale, here's a few places that the town of Rorkstead might be. This one, I'm thinking one of the options will be that it'll be set in Dugan's Hole, a very sort of small, insular community that
A
everybody
little
knows.
xenophobic. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
Um, and so we've got a comment from Troy Sandlin that Troy is still wanting to play in this. And, uh, well, Troy, actually, I don't know. Is your game tonight sold out, Brendan?
No, it is not. I have actually plenty of seats open tonight. I know Troy, who is a dear friend of mine, can't make it because
Oh,
he has
no.
he has a commitment. But to other members of the audience, if you are watching this live, go check out Baldman Games, table 211. That's me.
And we'll just, have to get you to run another session of it sometime when Troy is not on duty.
Exactly. Exactly.
uh,
And
yeah,
yeah.
I am also unfortunately engaged tonight, probably for very similar reasons.
Yep.
So I am also missing out on this because it was the only run through you're doing of it this weekend.
Hmm.
So okay. We're kind of switching it up a little bit then. Want to go a little bit more general and just like design philosophy at all. So, this is a just an adventure community content out on the DM's Guild. So as far as like fifth edition content goes, there is OGL content that's published wherever really, but drive through RPG being one of the most prevalent public marketplaces. Then there is um, DM's Guild content, which gives you a lot more leeway to play with the intellectual property of wizards. And then
Mhm,
within the DM's Guild, there are Adventurers League legal content, which currently would be Dungeon Craft, tying into this storyline. So this
mhm.
one is just in that middle ground. It's on the DM's Guild. So what made you decide to go with that versus like making it more OGL so you could sell it wherever you want, or making it more dungeon craft to try to get that Adventurers League crowd in?
Well, so on the extreme end, I didn't make it Dungeon Craft because I wrote it before Dungeon Craft was actually announced.
That was an
So I
easy
didn't.
answer then.
Yeah, exactly. So that was an easy decision to come to. I do have a couple of ideas about Dungeon Craft. I have another one that I'm working on. I'll just throw out the teaser there. The title is One Kobold Short of a Dragon.
But I don't hear anything about a trench coat. I'm confused.
We'll have to see. We'll have to see.
Maybe it's the dragon in a trench coat this time. That's a good twist. But yeah, no, one kobold short of a dragon. It's gonna be like the Trojan horse. It's three kobolds in a dragon suit.
It may
I
very
don't
well
know.
be.
I don't
May
know.
very
I
well
have no
be.
idea. Speculating. But no, I like the title. Um, I like the Dungeon Craft seeds. So I have no idea which one you would have chosen to go with that title because I can think of like six of them just right off the bat, and I'm like, I don't know how any of that's gonna go.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there wasn't a Dungeon Craft, so you went with just DM's Guild because you used some of the IP.
Exactly. So yeah, to continue your original question, I wanted the freedom to be able to say that this is in Icewind Dale. It has tie-ins to Rime of the Frost Maiden if you wish to use them. So it was kind of a no-brainer in that regard of the IP element, and then also being a newbie and just sort of deciding that I'm going to jump out there and do this. DM's Guild is kind of the platform. I don't necessarily have to advertise, although of course you put in your effort where you can. But yeah, I don't know where to start. So here I'll put it on the official platform where people are most likely to find it.
Right, and that makes sense, and that's actually for a lot of newer authors looking to get into fifth edition. That is the place that they start because the DM's Guild has a what you would call a captive audience.
Hmm.
They know you go there, you look at the front page, you see something, you're like, ah, brand new content. I haven't spent any money yet today, might as well buy it. or
Yep.
I'm not. Or on the other end of the spectrum, they're like, "Oh man, it's hit the bestseller ribbon. I guess I should spend my money on it." I won't tell you which
Mhm.
end of that spectrum I'm on, but I will say, if you're spending it out of your DM's Guild account where you're selling stuff, it doesn't feel like real money, so you can buy more stuff. Don't worry.
Right, right.
uh,
For sure.
I'm sticking with that. It's not real money. That's why it's okay that I've bought so much stuff.
Right. I have definitely fallen prey to that once or twice. On the other hand, at the back of my head is just like, you have to repay your art budget. You have to repay your art budget, which I'm still kind of working on. But so it's like I'm leaving that balance in there, but it gets so tempting sometimes.
Yeah, but the art though in this case was when the art budget was mostly the cover art, with some
Hmm.
internal art as well. Definitely. I don't know your sales numbers, but it's made it stand out. It is a very eye-catching cover. You're like, what is that fearsome beast, and do I get to kill it, or is it gonna kill me, or like, well, it's only a couple bucks. Better pick it up and find out.
Yeah.
So good art budget goes a long way. So that in mind, um, in this case, as far as art versus adventure, what came first, chicken or the egg? You had the adventure idea first, and then your artist made the art from your description,
Right.
and because artists are sorcerers and can just do that.
Yeah. Magic.
It's obviously sorcery because you can't just go to wizarding school and learn it. Um,
Hmm.
although you can study it and be better at it. So sorcery. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
although I think some artists might be warlocks because you make a deal with the.
Yeah, I was actually about pardon me. I lean that way. I feel like a lot of sorcerers are warlock, or that too. A lot of artists are certainly warlocks because I'm like, what did you sell?
Your soul to the art institute.
Yeah, yeah.
um, but yeah. So in general, though, like going forward or going sideways or backwards or whichever timeline we want to go, when you start out and you have an idea, where do you start? I know a lot of people start with like they see a visual, whether that be a piece of art, a movie, a video game, or whatever, and that to them starts this story in their mind. Other people see a cool stat block and they're like, oh god, this monster is it. This I've got to build a thing around it. Or other people are in the shower and they have thought about a specific scene and they want to have these people go to this place and that's it. That's all they've got.
Hmm.
And so like what's your starting point? Are you a I've got a monster, I've got a person, or like I've got art, or do you just have a fully formed story comes into your brain?
My start is generally more an idea, a sort of defining idea. So for writing this, it was the fact that I had already done these hags in a
Okay.
homebrew game, and then and just the idea that I want to share these hags with people.
Okay, so this one
Um,
started with the monsters. I've got cool
Oh yeah, yeah,
monsters.
yeah, that is true. Yeah, started with hags because I just love them so much. They're one of my favorite D&D monsters. But then, so that was sort of the broad theme is in monster inspired. So then, when I was trying to break down the three chapters and come up with the seeds, it was definitely more idea driven. Of okay, this what is this hag going to do that defines this adventure?
Okay.
It's going to be something with hunger and desperation. And, this one is going to be about, infighting was, I think, sort of the original idea that I had. And okay, I'll rephrase that as hate. So it's definitely, at least for these, it was an idea that usually
Okay.
starts my thought
So you had
process.
your overall big picture from the monsters, and then you kind of zeroed in on themes, and that's actually kind of one that I don't think I've heard before, but that kind of brings like a good point. Like if you've just got like a theme, like I want the theme to be, I want to do something where the theme is, we'll do it the opposite of hate more, peace. I want to do something about peace. Like
Yeah.
you start thinking in on like what are your tropes to do with peace, and then you kind of dive down that rabbit hole into other rabbit holes, and you're like, okay, so peace, we can either be like we start with like there's been a generations long war and now we're doing this, or um you can start with like you know peace, the world has been peaceful for generations and the peace is ending.
Yeah.
So or just like what is it like living in a peaceful sword coast where every year there's not some absolute calamity? Which is a great question because we still don't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. The closest we got would probably be Storm King's Thunder because, the Giants were taking their sweet time. So not everybody knew that it was a dire emergency, theoretically.
I mean, it was a dire emergency on a giant scale. But
That's true. That's true.
I'm funny, even if no one else thinks I am. But yeah, so that's kind of an interesting take on that, and definitely one that I'll have to think on and see if other people kind of approach it from that of like just a vague concept. Most people, I admittedly have a small sample size so far. We're not into the thousands yet. Maybe I'll do a survey. Tend to have something a little bit more like I've got to do this monster, or I or I thought of this like one really cool epic location.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have to think up a suitably epic thing and reason for people to go there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so yeah. You could actually probably do a really cool book on just like here's some really good themes and some story seeds off of those.
Yeah. Yeah.
'Cause, people buy stuff like that.
Yeah.
we're not
Yeah.
we're
That would
not
be.
all super creative. I'm pointing at myself. Sometimes,
I beg to differ, miss.
sometimes we are. Sometimes we use our good friend random table or other people's adventure seeds to jumpstart our own creativity.
Mhm.
And so uh yeah. So you got plans to do more adventures. Are you thinking to also expand your publishing now into other character facing player facing options, such as subclasses, magic items, things of that nature, or are you really feeling like you're more of a I'm an adventure guy?
I'm probably more of an adventure guy. The closest that I'm coming, actually, to kind of both of those topics you just raised, is the piece de resistance, the end of the trilogy, is that I'm also planning to do kind of a, you could call it a DM's companion book
Okay.
for the trilogy that has the more detailed stat blocks for each of the hags. It has their actual lair because, tiny spoiler alert, the trilogy will not take you to their lair. It's just these sort of pocket adventures.
But
So
a good hag coven has a very nice coven hideout somewhere.
absolutely.
It's
So
just
yeah,
it's
that
just
that little booklet's going to talk about that. And the closest that I get is that it's also going to include, from a player perspective, going to include pre-gens
okay.
that are well suited to the situation, and they'll be at each of the levels where these adventures are taking place. I've had a lot of fun playtesting those pre-gens as I've been doing these virtual weekends. People are getting to do a dry run on those pre-gens that we will eventually see for the public eye.
And that's kind of fun too when you get to go through and you've got these very accessible lower level adventures, and when you go through and you create those characters and those pre-gens with these backstories and everything that kind of slot right into it, you're making it a much more accessible game because someone can pick it up and be like, all right, I have the adventure, I have these characters already made because my players have never played D&D, and like that's an ordeal creating
Mm-hmm.
characters, and so we're gonna like baby step into it. So you're really kind of in the end there, ending up with a very new player friendly product when you add in those bells and whistles. um
Absolutely.
so but yeah, no, I'm an adventure person, which
Yeah.
I got my start in creative writing short stories. Yeah, it it
That's
it was fan fiction, everybody.
we appreciate your work.
So, and a lot of people, are the same way. Like, the design philosophy behind adventure is very much narrative driven
Yeah. Yeah.
versus it really is like a whole separate frame of mind and state of mind to do mechanics.
Hmm.
Although I am signed up to do a project with mechanics right now, and so I can do both.
Well, you learn eventually.
Yeah, no, you have to. Otherwise, you end up creating these adventures where you're slotting in these pre-existing monsters, and because you don't really understand the mechanics of how it all works, you're like, I accidentally created a TPK every single time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not really fun.
Hmm.
For the
Yeah.
players. For the players. For some DMs it might be. Um
Right. Which, that's not so much I don't, I like to challenge my players, especially if they get to high level. I played a home game and I took them all the way to level 20, 21 in one of their cases, thanks to the deck of many things. Um, but when they get to those high level, I put them in scenarios where like I don't know the solution. I'm putting this in front of you because it's realistic. You're gonna have to figure a way out because I didn't design one.
Hmm.
Um, but when it comes to writing an adventure that you're going to publish and put out there, you don't know those other players. You don't know that DM style. So, you have to sort of put some things in a concrete sense and give that DM permission to tweak them as they see fit because it's never going to be one size fits all.
Oh no.
Um, and that's why I actually, another thing that has kind of it's not actively part of my process, but I think it's helped me a huge bit is DMing at conventions. I've
Hmm.
been with Baldman Games for a number of years now. We're doing it online, but I was at physical conventions. So you get this crash course in random people coming to your table and the different sort of strategies that they might have and the play styles they might like. It's not just your friends every single week that you get accustomed to their norm. You sort of get this broad experience of like, okay, when I'm writing something and I want it to be for everybody, here are things that I never would have thought of if I hadn't been at a convention.
And that's a really good point, and that is definitely something that I would recommend to anyone wanting to get into adventure writing who isn't really sure that you know what players want, because the answer there is nobody knows what all the players want,
Right.
because all of the players want a different thing. But it gives you a good sense of, like, if you run a game, 2 games a day at a big convention, like, I don't know, we'll just go with Gen Con, which is probably not the one most people are going to do. But if you run two games a day at Gen Con, that's 8 games.
Yeah.
And that's 8 games times 6 people, and you're very unlikely to have the same 6 people or any repeats at those tables unless they know you.
Mhm.
So, you've already got basically 50 people there that you've never played for before that all have their thoughts and their opinions on how things should happen.
Yeah.
And all 8 of those games will be different. Your
Hmm.
your best intentions will never make those games run exactly the same.
No. No.
I have Adventures League adventures, which have a very strict format that I have written, that I have run, and I have never, ever, 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 ever run one the same way twice. It
Yeah.
is statistically, well, I was going to say impossible, but statistically very improbable.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but it is. It gives you great experience. So and that's actually a good thing to have kind of behind your design philosophy, is like, you now when you sit down and you're like, okay, I'm going to write one, you think of all those people, and
Hmm.
you think, well, how did they approach those adventures someone else wrote that I ran? And did any of them notice the tiny clues? No? Maybe I should make my clues a little more obvious, or put in like 5
Hmm.
ways to solve this one problem in case they miss 4 of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's very much, I um, you know, Curse of Strahd is my favorite hardcover from a thematic perspective. But, I keep talking about Storm King's Thunder. I love Storm King's Thunder because it was so much a scaffold. It was
Mm-hmm.
built in a way of like, sure, a DM could run it exactly the way that it's written, and it would be fine because it's all the bare bits that you need there. But if you know your players and you know your own particular style, you can hang other things off that scaffold.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's kind of what I go for when I'm writing is here's the bare bones, here's what's necessary for the story to function, and it will work fine if you run it exactly that way, and the players will have a fun time. But if you want to, you can fill in those nooks and crannies and elaborate or change, based on your table and your style. And I try to give the DM that explicit permission, say like, all right, here's how you might adjust the encounter. Here's some suggestions, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, like if you've got a party that's like super into role play, and you know from the beginning that they're probably not going to do all the investigating they need to find the hidden letters and the journal pages, but like they really want to talk to everybody. You can be like, all right, so we're gonna go, to the market or to the guild house or to the wherever, and you're gonna learn all of this by getting some quality gossip.
Absolutely, absolutely. And perfect example there in Icewind Curse's Hunger. I have as of yet, when I've run it, no one has really bit the bait, so to speak, but I have the information in there of, they meet a huge multi-generational family, and there's little blurbs on all of them that the DM could use if there's a party who just sits at breakfast forever talking with this family, and maybe that's their jibe. So I give you your little seeds to work from there. None of my players have bit on it yet, but it's there.
Yeah, and I think it's always nice to have too much information and not use it rather than not enough information and be like, well,
Yeah.
how I don't know how we got from point A to point B or why this person is accompanying us.
Yeah.
It just says they're with us and we're suddenly here.
Right.
Um
Make
but
it work.
on the other hand though, when you're designing also, you want to consider the DM and the amount of time they have on their hands. Like if somebody hands me an adventure and they want me to run it next week and it has this many pages, I'm going to be like,
Do I have to?
which ones are relevant?
Yeah.
Should I just read chapter 2 or do I need to read like 2 and 3 or
Yeah.
like and then this is a topic that got brought up like some of the current hardcovers you need to read the entire book before
Mm-hmm.
you know the plot.
Yeah.
And that has its own pros and cons.
Right. Yeah, no, I enjoy the hardcovers as a general premise. It's nice to have a whole story arc sort of put together, and have the broad strokes and some of the beats put together. But I lately, I'm currently running Descent into Avernus. I haven't started
Ooh.
into. Oh, I love it. I love it. It is great. But I've definitely taken liberties with it because I think in these past couple modules, the fact that you have multiple authors working on it and doing their own sections is kind of starting to show, because sometimes you see there's information that is a little contradictory, or information that really is pertinent to this
Well,
encounter is actually back at the beginning of the book, or it's in a different chapter.
you kind of have to consider too, in the books. I think it's best laid out actually in Volo's Guide to Monsters that you have to consider the reliability of your narrator for that section.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
they actually know what's going on, or are they telling you something and what you read in chapter 3 was the real truth?
Right. which is like, fun from a storybook, but
But
when I'm the
as a
DM.
DM, you should not be guessing. That is true. That is true. The DM should know. Have a little neon sign in the book.
This is true. This is what's going on.
Hagrid thinks that he got Norbert's egg by chance because he was lucky, but spoiler alerts for Harry Potter, it wasn't chance.
Right.
um
God.
so yeah, that's another important thing you have to consider when you're designing, like you want to leave those red herrings,
Yeah.
but
Mhm.
you want to also not at all do that to the DM.
Right. Yeah. There's a very clear delineation between, what's in your book, and spelled out so that the DM knows the answers, because, again, the DM is potentially going to be taking creative liberties, or they'll be thumbing through trying to find the right answer, whatever the case may be. It's just like, ooh, okay.
I have far too many NPCs that have been named some reductive form of bub
Yep.
because I know their name's important and I know I need to give them one, but fuck if I can find it now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I lean heavily on like my own NPCs, even when I'm running a hard cut. I mean, some of them are big, like you've got Zariel in Descent to Avernus. That one's easy and
Oh yeah.
straightforward. You got Mahadi, but my Wandering Emporium is chock full of other vendors. There's like rotating vendors. They'll come back and they'll be like, "Hey, is as the page turns here today?" Nah, she's gone, to get more books, but we've got Magic Miss Isles shop over there.
Oh, I like that. Magic missiles. uh,
Hmm.
does she sell wands?
She does sell wands. She is a fawn with a massive poof of red hair, and she shamelessly flirts with anyone who comes in.
I like her already. Um, yeah. So one thing that I like to ask people, and it really kind of gets to like your I don't know, gears turning or whatever. Um, if you could design anything, work on any project with anyone, you've got the resources, you've got the availability, you've got the connections, and the time. What would you want to do? What would be your like big dream project?
Ooh. Surprisingly easy, because
Oh,
I've been thinking about, especially this past month, all through February, I've really been analyze. I've got myself on Start Playing, and I've trying to figure out which adventures I want to write and the direction I want to take my career. And so one of those checklist items, way, way down at the bottom because of resources and time and whatnot, is that I have a mega dungeon that I, has been sort of teased at when I've done home games. It is I've working title. I refer to it as the Lost Archive of Centaur. It is this archive city tended by constructs. And but underneath the city is where they put all of the things that they didn't believe should ever see the light of day.
okay.
And then it gets sort of sealed up and long and forgotten, and so major huge dungeon crawl there that I want to put the time into someday to putting together.
So that would end up being like I'm trying to think scale wise, like well, you're familiar with Dyson Logos maps, right?
Pardon?
Are you familiar with Dyson Logos and the maps he makes? He did all the
uh,
maps for Waterdeep, that style map.
oh, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So I'm picturing like, like a map he did, but it's so big that you need like a bed sheet.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that we're definitely talking like
All the
Dungeon of the Mad Mage, Under Mountain, that sort of
all yeah.
book.
Yeah, all
Yeah,
the nooks and crannies and the oh, somehow you've gotten from the kitchen to the conservatory.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that is my big pipe dream someday project is my mega dungeon, my personal mega dungeon.
All right, and that's just a you yourself and you project. You don't have any like co-conspirators in your dream.
Um, that is actually a really good point. No, I'm not sure that I necessarily do. I have a very dear friend, my friend Ryan Fierro, who helped me with a lot of the play testing.
Mm-hmm.
He's the other DM that I mentioned, who I had him run the adventure for me to see what another DM would do with it. So he is near and dear and wonderful to my heart, a good D&D friend. So I'd probably collab with him on it to at least some degree. But yeah, I don't know. Um, uh, Luke Absalom Reed did my the amazing boss battle map for Icewind Curse's
Mm-hmm.
Hunger. That was just amazing. So I love his work. He would be super fun to continue working with on a project that
All right,
massive.
so
But
you'd have Luke, and you'd be like, Luke, make a dungeon and just make it
right,
make it empty, and then I'm gonna populate it.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Absolutely. So yeah,
that sounds super
I'm
fun.
sure that there are tons of people that I would enjoy. Like, all right, here, you take these 3 rooms, it'll be the elemental emporium, fill that with elementally themed stuff. Go wild.
I would um there's a couple of rooms there, right? But you're like, okay, it's just these 3 rooms. No, you walk through the doorway and you're actually transported to the elemental plane of fire.
Yep.
Good luck.
Yep. Absolutely.
You somehow still have to find your way to the 3rd doorway to get out.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's not even on this plane anymore.
It's somewhere. Good luck. Don't run into any genies.
Oh, don't make any wishes, or any
Right?
deals with devils.
Absolutely. Oh, the other thing that I have done, I have more merchants in my Wandering Emporium, and I have like double the number of warlords, and I've given most of the warlords to my friends who are not playing. So every week between sessions, they, send messages to each other and do like diplomacy or plot against the party or ally with the party, and one of them is an Earth genie, and she's fantastic.
So you kind of have a game of diplomacy running concurrently with your game of D&D.
Yeah, pretty much, because I can't do anything normal. Why,
I don't even know what that word means.
Yeah, what is that word?
Yeah, normal. Normal is in my book, normal is having your mother show up to your thing and send you little heart messages. I love you too, Mom.
Aw, yay! Hello, Jeannie's mom.
Yeah. Okay. Well, on that note about normal things, yeah. So, you've got your adventure running at Virtual Weekend D&D with Baldwin Games, and you're going to be doing that again for the next couple of virtual weekends, probably.
We will see. So at Winter Fantasy, it did great. People jumped on it because I think at Winter Fantasy, people are loving to try new things. At the virtual weekends, it remains to be seen whether people are looking, if they're turned off by it not being Adventurers League. People might be looking for the AL sort of stamp there. I don't know. So we'll see.
My sold out Theros games beg to differ.
Very true. Very true. So yeah, we
Um,
will.
I think so. February virtual weekend occupies kind of a unique space because we just did Winter Fantasy,
Yeah.
and so, um, the con burnout, it's real. You're like,
Mhm.
but you know, um, we just did breakfast, and I don't need second breakfast yet.
Don't we? Don't we? Who are these people?
I need
But no, I
second
I, I
breakfast
hear
would have
you.
been better timed next weekend.
Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
it runs right up into March, where we're gonna do March virtual weekend. So yeah. Obviously you've got time to think about it. Submissions aren't yet open for February. That's this month. March virtual weekend. So we could see.
Yeah.
If you
Absolutely.
get your game running there again, give people another opportunity, or like you said, you are available on startplaying.games, and I'll go ahead and
Absolutely.
drop your little profile there in case
Awesome.
anyone wants to contact you to arrange a time to play this, or to arrange a time to create a brand new custom super spooky this monster is going to eat your soul but you're going to be happy about it adventure.
Absolutely. Yeah. No matter what's happening with the virtual weekends, I'll probably continue to do it for at least a little bit. But yeah, no matter what happens, I will always be available and start playing to run this game personally for you. And I will be so excited to rip your faces off.
Yeah. Okay. Well, aside from that, that is about it for this episode of the Designer's Den. Um, so do you want to tell everyone where they can find you online, find your stuff, come hang out and play with you, what conventions you get to, whatever else it is you want to share about yourself,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. You can find me on Twitter, Brenden Dice at Brenden Dice. So that, and in the bio there, I've got a link tree to my DMs Guild content, which, oh gosh, I just totally forgot an important thing to call out. Icewind Curse's Hunger has also actually just been converted to Fantasy Grounds earlier this week. So if you are a Fantasy Grounds DM and you want to buy it sort of ready made to go, that has just happened thanks to Rob Tui and his wonderful team there. I can't
Oh,
believe I almost forgot that.
Rob Tui and the team, they do good work too. They've done oh god, he put up his stats recently, but it's thousands of fantasy ground conversions. So
Yeah,
um if that's your jam, uh
go check
you
it
know,
out.
yeah, I fantasy grounds and I we're not acquainted.
Yeah, same here. I'm totally foreign to that world, so I was like, "Oh, you'll do conversions? Yeah, by all means. I want to make this accessible to everyone in their preferred format." So, yeah, check me out on Twitter, Brenden Dice. My link tree has the DM's Guild content, both versions, and my Start Playing account. So you can contact me there as well if you're interested in having me run for you and your friends.
Yep, and it's Brandon with two E's right below his face there, much like my name is below my face. And yeah, so next week, you will be. We will. Can't reach my notebook, and I forgot. We've all determined I'm bad at calendars at this point. But next week, next week, we'll be back at the same time, 4 p.m. Central. And we are going to actually be welcoming back our first repeat guest. We're going to have John Connorself back on the show and to talk about um, some new design stuff that he's done since last time and a little bit of how that's changed some of his design philosophy and a lot of the other work that he's been doing, which I mean, I don't think it's a spoiler at this point to be like, we're going to talk a little bit about the epic he and I wrote together.
Ooh.
Because it is definitely an interesting process to design something like that. So we thought that would be kind of interesting that people would want to hear about. And then I've scheduled out most of March finally. Uh, I've actually had it scheduled for a while. But then we're going to have some really cool people coming up through March. We're going to have RP Davis and Matthew Whitby to start out the month. So we got a lot of cool stuff coming up. So stay tuned. And thank you for the follow, Bobicus J. Hope to see everyone next week or at the next virtual weekend, hanging out with Brendan and I.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Ginny.
Yeah, thanks again. And that's going to be it then for this episode of The Designer's Den. Until next time, everyone.